this is an iHeart podcast.
As a global leader in alternatives today, PGIM is capturing the potential of tomorrow. So as you look to diversify your portfolio, PGIM offers expertise in seeding, developing, and managing a broad range of liquid and illiquid strategies. With over $320 billion in alts across public and private markets, we are helping clients achieve their long-term goals. PGIM, our investments shape tomorrow, today.
For enterprise organizations, managing all your food needs is a tall order. But with EasyCater, you get a single workplace food vendor with the tools and resources to make it easy, giving teams across your organization an easy way to order from a huge variety of restaurants, all on one platform. All while consolidating your corporate food spend so you can control costs, streamlining billing and payment, and simplifying reporting. EasyCater, your business tool for food. To learn more, visit easycater.com/podcast.
As a contractor, I don't pay for materials I don't use. So why would I pay for stuff I don't need in my mobile plan? That's why the new MyBiz plan from Verizon Business is so perfect. Now I can choose exactly what I want, and I only pay for what I need.
Right now, with MyBiz plan, get our best price, as low as $25 a line. Visit verizon.com/business to get started today. New lines only. Price per month with 5+ lines. Includes autopay and paper-free billing and promotional discount. Taxes, fees, economic adjustment charge. Applicable add-ons, prices, and terms apply. Guarantee applies to base monthly rate and stated discounts only. Add-on prices additional. Offers in June 30th, 2025.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Very important headlines out, and they move the market.
How do you think the Fed is assessing what's happening with these tariffs?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
President Trump is questioning Russian leader Vladimir Putin's actions.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
Good morning, everyone. A special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance this Sunday for you across America, around the world. The Bloomberg News headline out right now: Iran reserves all options after U.S. hits nuclear sites. Welcome to our coverage for the next 4 hours here. We've been working on it all night to bring you the best in conversation here. Terry Haynes will join us on the Pulse of Washington. Other good guests as well. Importantly, Nathan Hager in moments will come to us with an update. We'll do that often here as the news moves. We have voices from London in moments to Ethan Bronner in Tel Aviv. And of course, all of our usual Bloomberg News and Bloomberg Surveillance sources. With me on a Sunday is Paul Sweeney. Paul, the shock of those headlines last night, it was a calm before the storm.
It was. And, President Trump had been out with some statements last week saying, basically up to 2 weeks he may consider some strikes against Iran. And then, of course, came out last night with some serious strikes against their nuclear facilities here with some of the biggest ordnance that the U.S. has. And we'll see what kind of response we get from Iran in the days coming forward. The
T-Live Go on the Bloomberg terminal is my major source for news flow, an aggregation of all that's going on out there. Good morning to Rosalind Matheson in London, driving that coverage with Golnar Montevalli as well. We will go to conversations, but the news flow right now is so thick, so dense, that we will often go to Washington to Nathan Hager for an update. Here with 99.1 FM in Washington, Nathan Hager.
Tom, Paul, good morning. It is potentially the most consequential foreign policy decision of President Trump's time in office. As we've been reporting, the president has authorized American bombers to strike Iran's 3 main nuclear sites. The president announced the attack first on social media and then in an address to the nation from the White House. Here are the president's remarks in full, as heard across Bloomberg last night.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin-Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel. And God bless America. Thank you very much.
And that was President Trump speaking from the White House last night alongside Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, as we get more of a sense of what was carried out in the overnight hours. The New York Times is reporting that 6 B-2 bombers dropped a dozen bunker buster bombs on Iran's underground nuclear site in Fordow. The same weapons, the Times is reporting, were dropped on Natanz. Cruise missiles were fired at Natanz and the third site at Isfahan as well. The Associated Press says this morning that satellite images do show damage to the entries at Fordow and the surrounding mountainside. And now the U.S. intelligence community had recently assessed that Iran was not committed to developing a nuclear weapon. And, of course, President Trump just days ago had said he would give Iran within 2 weeks before he made a decision to carry out that strike. But the president had said he did not believe the intelligence community's advice. This morning, Iran is vowing to respond. There have been sirens and explosions heard across Israel this morning as the Israeli military says Iran has fired more missiles at Israel overnight. Meantime, the Times is reporting that Iran's medium-range missile stockpile is depleted. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, says the door to diplomacy is no longer open. He plans to travel to Moscow today to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. I'm Nathan Hager in Washington. Tom and Paul, back to you.
Nathan, thank you so much. We'll be hearing from Mr. Hager often here across our 4 hours this morning. Again, we're 50 minutes or so away from an important briefing by the Secretary of Defense and I believe the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It is 2:10 p.m. in Tel Aviv, a changed Israel. We are advantaged by Ethan Bronner with us, leading all of our coverage out of the Middle East from Tel Aviv. Ethan, thank you so much for joining us here on an exceptional Sunday. How is Israel changed this morning?
Well, Morning, Tom. Morning, Paul. Look, Israel feels the sense in the air on television, radio, and people on the street is of enormous gratitude, incredible sense of excitement, the belief that this very, very powerful threat that had been hanging over this country's head for a long time, if it hasn't been eliminated, it has been very badly damaged. And in fact, we're waiting both the Israeli officials and everyone, waiting to see what we can learn about what happened at Fordow from those B-2s. And I think, but even more importantly than the specifics of what happened in Iran is this notion that the United States has embraced this country's outlook. The speech that President Trump just gave that you just played, it would not have been written by almost by a Likud spokesman. It was a total embrace of the Israeli view of Iran and of its own future. And so it's now, all that said, everyone is a little on edge and afraid, and flights were canceled all morning, and school is canceled and so forth. But we shall see. I think that there is a sense of an important corner having been turned.
Ethan, what are the expectations about retaliations, either within Israel or the region?
I mean, I think that there is enormous speculation about what Iran could and might still do. We know that they still have some long-distance ballistic missiles. We imagine that those 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium that they were holding at a place like Fordow they say was moved in advance of the bombing. So in theory, you could take 60%, which is what it was enriched to. You could take those containers, those canisters, and you could, in theory, make a nuclear weapon fairly quickly. Would Iran do that? No one really thinks that, but nobody really knows. Could Iran attack American bases and so forth, Israeli embassies? All these things are being discussed. Nobody knows. Iran is very defiant in its public posture. But it must be said also that Iran hasn't been this weak in a very, very long time. I mean, all of its militias around the region have been taken out by Israel. And now it is very much on its back foot and led by a man in his late 80s who's probably in a bunker.
Ethan, what are the next steps? Is it believed for the Israeli military, who's had such amazing success in Iran over
amazing
the last 8 or 9 days?
Indeed. Look, they're continuing to attack in southwestern Iran today. Let's not forget that Iran did shoot off about 40 missiles at Israel early this morning, Israeli time. Nobody was killed as far as we know, but 70 or 80 people were hurt. Buildings were taken down. So there is still a sense that this ballistic missile threat is of enormous significance for Israel. The idea that every day, every night, this country has to run to bomb shelters to avoid it is a huge threat. And, this is a country that has been a big part of the digital economy of the world. It can't continue in this fashion. So they are continuing to try to take out those launchers and missile sites. But we'll have to see what's going forward. It's still a little unclear what's next. And also it's unclear what the U.S. will do next.
We continue with Ethan Bronner driving all of Bloomberg News out of Tel Aviv. We welcome all of you on Bloomberg Television around the world, across the nation, on YouTube, good morning as well, and on Sirius XM across Canada and the United States on Channel 121. Joe Matthew coming up with a balance of power shifting in Washington. But first, we continue with Mr. Bronner. Paul?
Ethan, you mentioned the U.S. military, obviously a very dramatic and lethal strike by the U.S. military overnight. What is the expectation within Israel about the role the U.S. may play in the hours and days to come?
I think Israel has been extremely careful about expressing too much expectation. The idea being that, we make it easy and then they want to join the winners. That's been the approach. They think that's been an effective approach with President Trump. Obviously, the president himself said, we will go back if we do not get what we want. And he didn't specify in this speech, but has repeatedly specified that what Israel and the United States together want is for Iran to commit not to enriching uranium on its soil and to give up its highly enriched uranium. Iran has said it won't do that. I would say that Israel is going to continue to carry it out and hope that the U.S. will join them when necessary, yes.
Ethan, one final question. I'm sure we'll be speaking to you in the coming days as well.
Sure.
Ian Bremmer of Eurasia Group had a terse tweet or LinkedIn out last night where he said, this is the best week in the political career of Mr. Netanyahu. Do you agree with that? This is essentially Mr. Trump supporting Netanyahu as he could only dream of.
That's correct. I think this is an incredibly powerful personal triumph for Benjamin Netanyahu. This is a guy who was in pretty deep political trouble recently, and it seemed like it was over for him. In the story I wrote for Bloomberg early this morning, I said that that Netanyahu was seen as kind of Golda Meir, the guy who'd be forced out by a terrible tragedy, failure on his part, but in fact views himself as Franklin Roosevelt, the guy who withstood the attack on Pearl Harbor and turned it into a massive victory for himself in the United States. So that's how Netanyahu sees himself. And look, I think Ian Bremmer had a point there.
Literally, Ethan, as you were speaking of Pearl Harbor in December 8th, I was typing it into the computer. Ethan Bronner, thank you so much from Tel Aviv this morning. And we are on the same page, and we're on the same page with Joe Matthew, of course, wired into the politics of Washington, his effort with balance of power. Ethan, I go to December 8th, 1941, not for the drama of it or the equivalency of it, but it is seared in our childhood how FDR drove forward a dialogue of war. I don't sense a dialogue here. Brief us on how Republicans and Democrats will address his say on the Sunday talk shows like Face the Nation.
Well, it's a great question here, and obviously you're going to hear a different angle from Democrats and Republicans. I think Democrats, you can understand, they're going to be asking for the right to declare an authorization for the use of force. They're going to say that the president is acting irresponsibly in some cases. I'm more concerned or more interested to hear from Republicans who don't agree, because the split that we've seen in MAGA, that some call a civil war, and that might be pushing it a little bit far, has been fascinating. And this is something that weighed heavily on President Trump as he made this decision, knowing that Steve Bannon had lunch with him just a couple of days ago to urge restraint here. That is what preceded the 2-week announcement. You remember this interview with Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz that really brought this to life. Charlie Kirk and the others have been really challenging Donald Trump to stay true to his claim on the campaign trail to start no new wars. That was the hallmark of the first term. That was what's supposed to make him different than Joe Biden. And here we are now with MAGA trying to, on a Sunday morning, reconcile itself, whether it should, in fact, back the president of the United States on something that they're very worried about.
Joe, to the extent we want to get a view on how President Trump's backing, coalition, MAGA support, who should we look to there? Are there some figures that will really give us a sense of, is there a break in his support?
I think it's some of the names that I just mentioned. It's Steve Bannon, who's really been driving this. It's going to be Tucker Carlson, who the president called cuckoo, remembering that Tucker Carlson stumped for Donald Trump. All of these guys were on the trail with him to try to get him elected, and they still call themselves tried and true supporters. Whether that breaks now is going to be interesting. They may back him on an isolated strike, but guys, we're all waiting to see what Iran does next. And if it does strike U.S. interests in the region, this is going to feel real different.
Joe, as we get to the Hegseth press conference, frame out the relationship of the Pentagon to the White House. Last night, we had President Trump with the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the Vice President, all in civilian dress, the civilian superiority over our military. Tell us how General Kane and the others of the military fit into this discussion.
These are great questions because there are a lot of new faces here at the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, other than Pete Hegseth, have really not been public figures so far. Our reporting, my reporting, would suggest that it's in fact not Pete Hegseth we should be watching, but Steve Feinberg, the Deputy Defense Secretary, who has been knee-deep in this, working directly with the White House, crossing the Potomac to make that connection, while Pete Hegseth deals with a lot of hearings and a lot of other issues that have put him somewhat on the outs with President Trump. They did stand side by side. We should note Hegseth and Trump in the cross hallway at the White House last night, and Hegseth is going to hold forth in this news conference. He'll be the face of this publicly. Behind the scenes, it's Feinberg working with the White House. to a great degree, which is really something that feels unusual at a time of war.
But with your expertise on this, Joe Matthew, I mean, the fact is Stephen Andrew Feinberg is a major Republican donor. We in the Bloomberg world folks know him all with his work at Cerberus, acclaimed tennis player at Princeton, et cetera, et cetera. What is his competency here within the Pentagon?
Listen, that's not a question that I can probably answer, and we have a great team covering the Pentagon on that front. He hasn't been on the job for that long. Whether he has real military chops is another matter, and the same goes for a chairman of a Joint Chiefs who's got great experience on the battlefield, but is actually pretty new to this job, remembering that Donald Trump wanted to clean house, and Pete Hegseth did as well. All of this remains to be seen on, really, frankly, what's the next move? We can't underscore the importance of what just happened, but this is not the end of something. It's the start of something. When we start considering the needs of force protection in places throughout the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, like even in Iraq and Syria, where we have thousands of U.S. troops, the UAE, for instance, could all be within the reach of Iran right now. And politically speaking, you know, how far does Congress let this go without, in fact, an authorization for the use of force? That's going to be a big question in the weeks ahead, because this is not likely to be something that stops tomorrow.
Joe, what do we expect from the Democrats here? There's some reporting that they were not even briefed on this operation here.
Yeah.
What's the expectation?
It's not going to help the conversation, like Tom said, coming up after we're done here when we turn to the Sunday morning shows here on Bloomberg. They were already concerned about this. They were already calling out Donald Trump for preparing a strike like this now that he's done it and they weren't in the loop. That goes for a lot of things around here. We've got a reconciliation process that they're not involved in as well. So it's a familiar feeling for Democrats, but when it comes to national security, it has a bit of a different tinge.
Joe Matthew, thank you so much. With Balance of Power, who will be with us through the show this morning. Joe Matthew in Washington.
If this government spending in defense goes towards things like R&D that have dual use civilian purposes, you could get spillovers that actually end up enhancing productivity in Europe and so have a more long-lasting impact on growth.
To learn more about the intersection of national security and global trade, subscribe to PGIM's The Outthinking Investor in your favorite podcast app.
For enterprise organizations, managing all your food needs is a tall order. But with EasyCater, you get a single workplace food vendor with the tools and resources to make it easy, giving teams across your organization an easy way to order from a huge variety of restaurants, all on one platform. All while consolidating your corporate food spend so you can control costs, streamlining billing and payment, and simplifying reporting. EasyCater, your business tool for food. To learn more, visit easycater.com/podcast.
In business, they say you can have better, cheaper, or faster, but you only get to pick two. What if you could have all three at the same time? That's exactly what Cohere, Thomson Reuters, and Specialized Bikes have since they upgraded to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. OCI is the blazing fast platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs, where you can run any workload in a high availability, consistently high performance environment and spend less than you would with other clouds. How is it faster? OCI's block storage gives you more operations per second. Cheaper? OCI costs up to 50% less for computing, 70% less for storage, and 80% less for networking. Better? In test after test, OCI customers report lower latency and higher bandwidth versus other clouds. This is the cloud built for AI and all your biggest workloads. Right now, with zero commitment, try OCI for free. Head to oracle.com/strategic. That's oracle.com/strategic.
We say good morning to you on Bloomberg Television, on Bloomberg Radio, worldwide. A special good morning to 99.1 FM in Washington. There will be a briefing here in 40 minutes scheduled by the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We'll see who else shows up for that briefing. We welcome all of you around the world, particularly on YouTube, where you may subscribe to Bloomberg podcasts growing each and every day. With the news flow this morning, and thank you, Rosalind Matheson and Top Live Go, TLIV Go on the Bloomberg Terminal worldwide. We need a briefing every 20 minutes. In Washington, Nathan Hager.
Tom, Paul, it is a wider war in the Middle East this morning. Last night, President Donald Trump said American bombers had completely and totally obliterated Iran's three main underground nuclear sites at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. In an address to the nation from the White House, the president said there will be far greater attacks if Iran does not make peace. This morning, the Associated Press says satellite images show damage to the entries and surrounding mountainside at Fordow. The UN's nuclear watchdog had warned against an attack like this because of the risk of radiation leaks. But right now, the International Atomic Energy Agency says there is no sign of increase in off-site radiation levels. And Iran's Red Crescent says there were no deaths from last night's attacks. This morning, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the strike was done in full coordination with his country. Now, Iran is vowing to respond. There have been sirens and explosions heard in Israel this morning. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says the U.S. crossed a very big line last night, that it also bombed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and the international rule of law. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says now is the moment for Iran to engage in credible diplomacy while warning the country cannot obtain a nuclear weapon. China just released a statement strongly condemning the U.S. strikes and calling for a ceasefire, particularly from Israel. Iran's foreign minister says he will head to Moscow today to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. That is Iran's strongest ally in the region. I'm Nathan Hager in Washington. Tom and Paul.
Nathan, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. For the markets today, let's remember it is Sunday. Little trading on the Bloomberg Launchpad. There is one thing trading. And Paul, I'm frankly surprised Bitcoin is down so little as a thermometer, a global thermometer of the moment.
Yep.
It really isn't declined all that much off the shock of this geopolitics.
And Tom, Dan Curtis from Bloomberg Television out of London, some really good, helpful news here. Just to keep us up to date, oil will begin trading 6 p.m. Eastern time tonight. U.S. Treasuries open 8 p.m. Eastern time tonight. U.S. equity futures will open around 6 p.m. Eastern time tonight. And the currency's around 5 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday. So it's later today. We'll start to get a sense of the market's reaction.
I pick it up at 7 p.m. as a traditional thing. Maybe it'll be a little bit earlier this time around. But look to Bloomberg this evening for the Asia morning. His book of 13 years ago is definitive. It is indispensable when leaders really matter. It is a set of chapters of leadership in times of crisis for America. Gautam Mukunda joins us, of course, with Yale University, and in this case, a book from the Harvard Business Review of years ago. Professor, thank you so much for beginning our conversation this morning. We are alluding to December 8th, 1941. In our memories is a protocol, a process of going to war. Did the president breach that protocol last night?
Oh, completely. We're not even in the universe of that protocol, but that is not a set of laws and rules that we've enforced in my lifetime, so we're not going to start now.
When you look at indispensable, and I look at the chapter leading up to World War II, which is on Chamberlain, and then over to Churchill, is well, from where you sit and the synthesis of your books on the presidency, is this a nation behind its president?
Not at all. And so there's always a rally around the flag effect during a crisis. And I think the first opinion polls will probably be pretty supportive, but because they usually are. But most polling for this beforehand was not supportive of a strike. And I heard the discussion about whether the MAGA movement will fracture over this. I doubt that it will. You're already seeing major people there who had yesterday opposed a strike, today saying the president has acted wisely. But for the country as a whole, I think a lot depends on what happens next. It is, at this point, the Iranians' move, not ours, that will determine how things play out.
Gautam, what do you think pushed President Trump to make this move? Again, a very substantial move in terms of really aggressively deploying U.S. military in a very sensitive part of the world. What do you think was his motivation?
It really is. And it's worth sort of emphasizing that there was no urgency here, right? He had said, I'm giving you 2 weeks. The Iranians had signaled they were open to negotiations. These facilities were not going anywhere. The Iranians were not within weeks of a bomb or anything like that. So it seems kind of like, and getting inside the head of the president is always, difficult. He saw the Israelis having an extraordinary tactical and operational success, and you can't overstate just how effective the Israeli attacks have been. And he kind of wanted to get in on it, and also, observed that there were a handful of targets that they could not strike that we could. And again, we don't have bomb damage assessment from any reliable source yet. We don't know how well these strikes worked.
What do you expect over the next coming days and weeks, Gautam, from the U.S. Congress, both sides of the aisle, in terms of response to this news?
So many Democrats will be outraged that they weren't even briefed in, and that, again, is a violation of the law. The law requires that you brief in senior Democrats as well as senior Republicans when you're doing this kind of operation, and the Trump administration just ignored that. But at the same time, I think Democrats probably don't want to be seen as being completely opposed to a successful operation if it is successful. So there's going to be some cross currents there, as there are on the Republican side, where Rand Paul, I think, has already come out and saying he opposed these actions. So we're going to see a lot of waiting and seeing. The domestic politics are going to depend a lot on how the Iranians respond and how we respond to that response. But I will note, so Robert Kagan had a really powerful article in The Atlantic yesterday pointing out that administrations that were a lot more sort of careful about civil rights and domestic rights than the Trump administration have used wartime to crack down domestically. And there has to be some concern that the Trump administration is going to do that here, too.
I look at it in the Kagan piece, American democracy might not survive a war with Iran. That's very strong language here, Gautam Mukunda. The basic idea and my heritage is on a presidential effort of military force, the nation in some way rallies around him. At this press conference in 30 minutes, is there going to be a nation rallying around the Secretary of Defense?
I'm sure there will be some, but this administration has done everything possible to counter that. I mean, you even have them releasing photographs of him in the Situation Room wearing a campaign hat, during a military strike. It's just impossible to imagine any previous president doing that, both out of, you shouldn't, but also just because if you do want the country to rally to you, you should give some signs that you respect and value half the country.
Gautam Mukunda with us, and we will continue. His book, Indispensable in Picking Presidents, looks at the history of the administration, the executive branch across America. We welcome all of you, a special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning on Bloomberg Television worldwide, on YouTube worldwide. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. A special good morning to 92.9 FM in Boston, down to here in New York City, Bloomberg 1130, and Nathan Hager's 99.1 FM in Washington. We will continue. Many good guests coming up here besides Professor Mukunda. Peter Shear's scheduled to be with us in a bit. Paul Sweeney to the professor.
Gautam, how do you expect President Trump to play this in the days ahead? I mean, it appears at this early stage a wonderful military success. Do you expect him to play this up or to try to just move forward and not, expose any potential rifts in his support?
I think he will continue to play as a success. But, Paul, I'm just going to emphasize, we don't know if this was a success yet. Let's just, go down the list, right? We don't know where the uranium hexafluoride is. So we just don't know, right? Like, is it buried under Fordow? Is it in Natanz? Is it in Isfahan? The IAEA has said that they've just lost track of it. And at 60%, that uranium is quite close to being ready to be weaponized. So if, just hypothetically speaking, if we damaged but did not knock out Fordow, they likely will have enough centrifuges there that if they choose to make a sprint to a bomb, they might be able to do it relatively quickly. If we completely destroyed Fordow, then it's a different situation. But we don't know yet. So it's very early to be announcing that we have complete success here.
So, Gautam, I mean, again, this was a significant escalation by the U.S. What do you think the U.S. is willing to deal with in terms of retaliation here? If there is retaliation, is this going to be something that could drag the U.S. into maybe a little bit more involved situation?
I think that's the fear on everybody's part, including, I'm sure, the administration, which does not want that. The Iranians there are at least some reports that the Iranians have already started GPS jamming ships in the Straits of Hormuz. If they really wanted to escalate, blocking the straits would be a way they could do that. And that's probably still within their military capabilities, since they can use mines instead of other things to do that. But that would have consequences, right? On the world price of oil, the Chinese would probably be very unhappy if they did that. So they may not choose to take that step. That means that more like attack on U.S. forces in the Gulf, in the Gulf area, attack on American embassies, things like that. And then I just sort of events have a momentum all of their own in which they could do that. And if Americans die in Iranian retaliation, then there's going to be pressure on the president to respond once again.
Professor, one final question. And I guess I go from Clash of Civilizations, a thought from the Charles River up in Boston years ago, the Clash of Civilizations, over to Ian Bremmer, Eurasia Groups, every nation for themselves. Wow, have we set up a change of our foreign policy? Secretary Rubio symbolizes that for the nation. What is the foreign policy coming out of state?
It's not clear that foreign policy is coming out of state because, I mean, apart from all the hats that Secretary Rubio is wearing, we keep seeing that Trump make statements that conflict with his. If I were in state, what I would be really worried about is the signal we just sent is the way you make sure that the United States does not attack you is to already have nuclear weapons, right? The North Koreans demonstrated that, the Iranians who didn't have them were vulnerable. There have to be quite a few countries in the world that are looking at this and saying, well, the non-proliferation regime is over because the Iranians were signaling that they would negotiate, and we struck anyways. And so they've got to be thinking that given what's happened, the right thing for them to do is make a sprint to acquire nuclear weapons as fast as possible.
Gautam, thank you so much. Really appreciate it this morning. Professor Yale University, Gautam Mukunda, with his really incredible books on the presidency of the nation. Paul, I think the questions here into this press conference is actually where is policy coming from? And I remember Bush the younger, there was a surprise while they're making decisions at the White House. I'm unsure of this statement, Paul Sweeney. Can we say all decisions are coming from the White House? Maybe that is so.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it, not just in military situations, but on pretty much all policy seems to emanate from the White House. And that's the way the president is comfortable managing his administration.
For enterprise organizations, managing all your food needs is a tall order. But with EasyCater, you get a single workplace food vendor with the tools and resources to make it easy, giving teams across your organization an easy way to order from a huge variety of restaurants, all on one platform. All while consolidating your corporate food spend so you can control costs, streamlining billing and payment, and simplifying reporting. EasyCater, your business tool for food. To learn more, visit easycater.com/podcast.
In today's changing job market, finding and retaining top talent is more challenging than ever. But with Express Employment Professionals, you can streamline your hiring process and save both time and money. Did you know that 92% of U.S. hiring decision makers expect to face challenges finding qualified candidates this year? The costs of recruiting, advertising, interviewing, and onboarding can add up quickly. But Express has the solution. Go to expresspros.com today. Ready to hire differently? Whether you need contract workers or your next core team member, contact Express Employment Professionals. Express leverages advanced technology and a streamlined hiring process to reduce your recruitment costs. From efficient job postings to customized candidate screening, Express makes hiring easier and more cost-effective. With more than 870 offices, you have a local team ready to help manage your workforce. Go to expresspros.com to find a location near you.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Of extraordinary ability with his tours of duty at Reuters and Jerusalem Post, Dan Williams has provided really granular coverage for Israel and the Levant for all of Bloomberg News, and he joins us now from Jerusalem. Dan Williams, thank you for taking time in your afternoon on our Sunday morning here in New York. Dan, I look at the change in Iran, and it projects to their support of Hezbollah to the north in Lebanon, of maybe Gaza in certain forms as well, and other things. As the president said, Iran, the bully. Is the bully diminished this morning?
I think the Middle East power structure has been reordered dramatically, possibly more than seen in a single instant in decades, if ever. This is something that many in the Middle East were anticipating, some dreading, some hoping for, going back decades. The conclusive, potentially, intervention of the U.S. superpower with U.S. firepower, putting paid to sites in Iran that were designed specifically to withstand conventional attacks, including by Israel, which is arguably the Middle East's mightiest military power. So what we've seen now is Trump upending effectively a status quo that was in place, that was shaken admittedly by 8 or 9 days of Israeli strikes, but nonetheless this changes the equation utterly.
Dan, it's so important you bring this up, and this goes back to October of 1981. Paul Sweeney brought this up earlier. Dan Williams is framed around the sea change of the War of 1967, seared in a memory of a certain vintage is the assassination of Anwar Sadat. Is all of Israeli leadership, and maybe even Western leadership, are they at risk this morning because of this bombing last night?
That's an extraordinarily good question. It's very acute. It would seem that you're referring mainly to the prospects of upheaval within Iran against the Iranian leadership. Is that what you're referring to?
I'll go there as well. I mean, it can go both ways. It can be threats to the Iranian leadership, including the Ayatollah, or the other way, as we saw with Rabin and with Sadat decades ago. Which, is that where we are this morning, where everyone's at risk?
I wouldn't say the Israeli leadership is at any risk. Indeed, there was an assassination of Prime Minister Rabin exactly 3 decades ago. That was over risk-taking and peacemaking with the Palestinians. If anything, the current leadership, specifically the Prime Minister Netanyahu, despite his very significant dip in popularity over judicial reform efforts 2 years ago, over the disastrous October 7th attack of Hamas, which begun this war, I think you're going to see his popularity increase with this, including critics. And we've seen this already. The opposition leader rallying to him, regular critics in the Israeli media admitting that this war, the way he conducted it, and in fact, the way he conducted contacts with President Trump, such that President Trump decided to intervene, that all works in Netanyahu's favor. I think he has as solid a position as he had in recent memory in Israel. As for Iran, there's been much speculation that this situation could effectuate a regime change. I think we should be cautious about predicting that, if only because under threat of external action or under external attack, people tend to rally to their flag, even if in quieter times they were less likely to do so, even if in quieter times they're unhappy with their government, with a regime that rules over them. However, it's quite possible that in the long run, with this Iranian regime having seen its prestige dented, having been humiliated like this, having seen its military might, which provided it with a degree of domestic clout as well, so blunted by the combined force of Israel and the United States, once that dust settles, we could actually see some serious change in the internal dynamics of Iran. Yes.
Dan, what do you think the next steps are for Israel here? I mean, it feels like maybe we're waiting to see what Iran does, but that's not. Israel doesn't tend to wait and see what people do. They tend to act. What do you believe the next days will hold for Israel?
Well, indeed, a couple of things happened within short order of the world learning of these attacks ordered by Trump on these 3 sites in Iran, these 3 nuclear sites. One was that Israel announced that it has pursued its own nightly attacks, including one set of sorties against one of the sites attacked by the United States, Isfahan, showing that the U.S. must have struck some nuclear targets there. Israel is coming in perhaps on a mopping up operation, perhaps addressing targets that weren't addressed by the United States. As far as Israel is concerned, the work continues. There was also a missile and UAV salvo by Iran against Israel, quite a bit of damage, 6 a.m., pretty much the entire country going down to shelters. That would seem par for the course. The big question is, was that all? Was Iran basically ticking a box in terms of its retaliation? Keep in mind, it has yet to retaliate, to my knowledge, against the United States. Perhaps it sees Israel as a U.S. proxy, and that's a safer retaliation option, especially if it's a one-off. If indeed it is a one-off, I think what we're going to see now is very, very, very careful consideration on the part of the Iranian leadership, whether they should do an entire review of their position, whether they should capitulate on their nuclear program, submit to US and Israeli, by extension, demands regarding uranium enrichment, and in doing so, preserve themselves. Because it would appear to me the choice now faced by the Iranian leadership is between self-preservation, i.e. regime preservation, and preserving a nuclear program that has been significantly degraded, possibly retarded by months or even years. It's basically like guarding a jalopy of a nuclear program, even in the knowledge that that will actually extend the military strikes suffered by the regime, potentially toppling it in an irrevocable manner. So I think it's quite a binary choice. And I think the Israelis and possibly the Americans, I think Trump actually made this quite clear in his statement, are banking on the Iranians now doing an about-face diplomatically, and this really bringing about dramatic change in the entire disposition, the entire direction of negotiations, and the future of the nuclear program, i.e. an effective shutting down of what remains of the nuclear program should Iran agree to do that.
Dan, it's been an extraordinary time in Israeli history since October 7th. So much change, most of it to, the military benefit of Israel. Is there a view in Israel that things are really potentially different now?
Yes, it feels like a revolutionary moment. October 7th was a cataclysm. Hamas basically was a game changer in terms of an attack on Israel, what Israel suffered from that attack, completely surprised by a ostensibly far inferior force. Hamas showed great original thinking, quite military virtuosity, if they like. They really pulled off a surprise, a shock attack on Israel. But it also changed the rules as far as Israel's concerned. If Hamas came along with a game changer, then Israel's actually going to change the game. And the new game, as far as Israel is concerned, is going in the offensive, destroying all potential threats in all neighboring countries, and also Iran, which Israel considers its arch foe. And so far it would appear, with all the costs involved, and the costs have been very significant to Palestinians in Gaza, to Israelis, especially on the home front, it would appear that the Israeli campaign is being pursued to its full and may even succeed.
Dan Williams in Jerusalem, we look forward to your reporting here in the coming hours. Dan Williams with Ethan Bronner in Israel this morning.
For enterprise organizations, managing all your food needs is a tall order. But with EasyCater, you get a single workplace food vendor with the tools and resources to make it easy, giving teams across your organization an easy way to order from a huge variety of restaurants, all on one platform. All while consolidating your corporate food spend so you can control costs, streamlining billing and payment, and simplifying reporting. EasyCater, your business tool for food. To learn more, visit easycater.com/podcast.
Wells Fargo seeks broad impact in their communities, focused on supporting customers and communities through housing affordability, small business growth, financial health, and more. Donated over $2 billion to strengthen local communities over the last 5 years. Wells Fargo, the bank of doing. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/say-do. Support includes contributions from Wells Fargo & Company, Wells Fargo Bank N.A., and the Wells Fargo Foundation.
This July 4th, celebrate freedom from spills, stains, and overpriced furniture with Anabay, the only machine-washable sofa inside and out, where designer quality meets budget-friendly pricing. Sofas start at just $699, making it the perfect time to upgrade your space. Anabay's pet-friendly, stain-resistant, and interchangeable slipcovers are made with high-performance fabric that's built for real life. You'll love the cloud-like comfort of hypoallergenic, high-resilience foam that never needs fluffing, and a durable steel frame that stands the test of time. With modular pieces you can rearrange anytime. It's a sofa that adapts to your life. Now through July 4th, get up to 60% off site-wide at washablesofas.com. Every order comes with a 30-day satisfaction guarantee. If you're not in love, send it back for a full refund. No return shipping, no restocking fees, every penny back. Declare independence from dirty, outdated furniture. Shop now at washablesofas.com. Offers are subject to change and certain restrictions may apply.
This is an iHeart podcast.